Hey guys, it's Bree. I just finished Balzac and Little Chinese Seamstress by Dai Sijie. This is a story about his time during the Chinese Cultural Revolution when he was sent to a re-education camp in the mountains. It's a fictionalized version of his stories, so some elements of it are true, and some of the elements are kind of embellished or I don't know how made up they are, but are fictionalized. It follows him and his friend Luo, who were sent to the mountains and kind of forced to undergo some really torturous stuff, and how they kind of get a hold of some banned material. Balzac, if you don't know, is a French author. So the character who represents Sijie is never actually named throughout the story. He's always just the first person perspective. There are really very few characters throughout the book. One of them is Sijie's character, like I said, unnamed. The other is his friend Luo, and the other is a girl known as the Little Chinese Seamstress who lives a couple towns over. Eventually, throughout the stories, the boys get a hold of this kind of banned book. It's a translation of a French novel into Chinese, and so they are kind of keeping it hidden in their campsite, trying to get a hold of more forbidden books. And after Sijie's friend Luo falls in love with this little seamstress girl, they start to really kind of go after those stories more fervently because she really loves them and they really love them. The detail in the story is very rich. It's just so jam-packed full of description and detail. It's almost mind-boggling. It's not a terribly thick book. It's a little under 200 pages. So there's not a whole ton of like plot. It's not going to be like an action plot, obviously. What plot there isn't always terribly suspenseful, but it's very, I want to say mellifluous, which is like sing-songy, but I don't know if that makes sense in terms of a plot, but it's very fluid. I think one of the things I liked most about it is that it isn't a love story about Sijie's character. There's a romantic subplot, but it's not involved with him. So the romance involved isn't ever really just too much. Some of the things that he describes the characters undergoing are just really terrible. They're up in the mountains, it's a rural town, and there's like no plumbing system, and so the boys are, for instance, are charged with taking these huge buckets of human and animal waste up into these fields, like a pretty far walk, a couple miles, and dumping them into the fields. And the mountain is really rugged, so they come back and they're just covered in filth, to the point where they can't really smell anything else. And just some of the things he describes like that, it's just kind of like, whoa, it takes you back. Another interesting thing that I thought is that even though they're constantly kind of being threatened with having to undergo re-education for their entire lives, because both of them are kind of in this class of people who, because their parents are really wealthy and their parents were, you know, people of science and, you know, a variety of different reasons, they think that they're never going to be able to go home. He mentions a couple times that for the class of people that the two of them are in, it's like 3 out of 1,000 of these kids get to go home. And I don't know how accurate that actual number is, but that's certainly what they were believing. And for all of that, there's never really a fear of being left there. Not so much because they don't think it's a possibility, but because they think that's just how it's going to be, that they're just never going home. And in a way, rather than trying to manipulate themselves into going back home and to being in a position where they can, they kind of just try to make the best of what's happening. And that to me was really interesting. It was really kind of neat to see. Like I said, the story itself is not terribly dynamic. It does reach a pretty high point at the end. But even that, it was kind of slow building. And again, I mean, it's very beautifully done. So it doesn't feel unnatural. And the pace of it, partly because it's so short and partly because of the way it's described, doesn't feel slow. It just feels kind of natural, like the natural progression of the story. He does retrace his steps a lot, so he'll introduce something and give the context for it, and then later when he mentions it again, he might give you the context for it again, and even do that a couple times. So, I mean, sometimes it kind of feels like he's hitting you over the head with a hammer. I think I'd probably give this one a 3.5 out of 5 stars, maybe a 4. Like I said, it was really interesting to read, and I think it was interesting to learn more about the context of the Cultural Revolution in China. And it's not long at all. This took me a day. If you have read Balzac and the Little Chinese Seamstress, let me know. I'd be really interested to hear your thoughts about it. And if you have any suggestions based on me having read this, I would love to hear those too. I'm really trying to get a hold, like I've said a couple times now, of some more translations and really start to kind of embrace those as a part of literature that I don't get exposed to very often. Anyways, I will talk to you guys later. I hope you're having a fantastic reading week. Bye.